Hi, welcome to another episode of The Golden Truth. My name's Dave Kranzler, and with me is my co-producer, John Titus.
Hey Dave, how you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Today
Excellent.
I just wanted to discuss briefly the Goldman Sachs Ecuador gold swap. I've heard a lot of misconceptions about it and a lot of fear being expressed that Goldman's taking the gold and using it to manipulate the market. Just to review briefly the transaction, it's 466,000 ounces of gold that Ecuador is giving to Goldman. 466,000 ounces is 13 tons of gold. In return, Goldman's giving Ecuador what's being described as a highly liquid note, $580 million worth of a note that goes to Ecuador, and the term is 3 years. Goldman gets 13 tons of gold to use for 3 years. The gold leaves Ecuador's vault, and Ecuador gets this note that they can probably take to a bank or other financing company and raise $580 million to use for its treasury purposes. We know Ecuador went through a bankruptcy not too long ago, and they've had some liquidity problems, and so they needed some sort of transaction to raise money, apparently. But why didn't Goldman just give Ecuador a $580 million loan secured by gold? We know from the GOFO rates in London that a loan securitized by gold carries a very, very low interest rate. Like, 1% for 3 years is probably what the equivalent would be, even though the GOFO only goes out to a year. So based on the fact that this was structured as a swap, and that the gold is leaving Ecuador's vault, we can assume that Goldman needed the gold for some purpose. Now, I want to just point this out anecdotally. I'm not saying this is where the gold is going, but Russia in April did buy 25.5 tons of gold for its central bank, and this 13 tons represents about half of that. So maybe Goldman needed to scrounge up another 13 tons to deliver into Russia. That's just one place that it could be going. It could be going to India, it could be going to China, it could be going to Vietnam. And let's be clear about one thing. You do not manipulate the market with 13 tons of gold. For instance, in April 2013, thanks to the sleuthing of Alasdair Macleod, we found out the Bank of England took 1,300 tons of gold and ostensibly dumped it on the LBMA, and it took that much gold to knock down the price of gold by $200. So rest assured, 13 tons is not being used to manipulate the market.
Dave, why was this deal announced at all?
That's actually a really good question, because in terms of materiality, it's not a material transaction for Goldman. They certainly wouldn't have had to have announced it. However, what would have happened is that someone would have noticed that 55% of Ecuador's gold reserves was missing, and that had to be explained. So that's definitely one reason why this transaction was announced. Another reason could have been was that it was a way for Goldman to publicly alert whoever they owe 13 tons of gold to that that gold was on the way. And it was also a way for Ecuador to let its creditors know that it was about ready to come into $580 million of liquidity. So I'm sure that's why they made a big public spectacle of it. I would like to point out that a couple months ago, Goldman tried to get 160 tons of gold from Venezuela. That was the gold that Hugo Chavez had repatriated a couple years ago. In fact, Goldman pre-announced that a deal was going to be done, and about a week later, Venezuela adamantly denied it. So Goldman clearly is looking to shake gold out of some of these Latin American and South American central banks because they need physical gold, and I think everyone knows that. I'll wrap this up by saying that tonight I'm going to be posting another junior mining stock research piece on my website. This stock actually popped up about 13% on Friday. There was no news. It's faded a little bit, but even after that pop, this stock is still incredibly, incredibly cheap. And that, my friends, is the golden truth.